No freeloaders allowed at Christmas this year, so we're only inviting your sister and her family, my dad sneered. 2 weeks later, the deadbeat they cast aside welcomed everyone to her $8 million mountain lodge. Guess whose Christmas got ruined? My world ended with one phone call. Not with a bang, but with my father David's voice, casually explaining why I wasn't good enough for Christmas this year. They had no idea I was about to build my own Christmas, without them. The cold sting of his words still echoed in my cramped studio apartment, the worn walls feeling like they were closing in around me. I was still in my hospital scrubs, the sterile scent a stark contrast to the sudden, hollow ache in my chest. David's tone dripped with contempt as he explained I wouldn't be getting an invitation. 28 years of family gatherings, of helping my mother Carol prepare her famous crown roast, of watching my niece Maya and nephew Leo tear through wrapping paper on Christmas morning, all reduced to this moment. Something inside me just cracked. We've decided to keep things small this year, he continued, his voice leaving no room for discussion. Emily and Michael are coming with the kids. Of course, your mother, and I just think it's better if we celebrate with people who have their lives together. You understand? I understood perfectly. My sister Emily had married a corporate attorney, lived in a house with a 3-car garage, and produced 2 photogenic children who attended private school. I had dropped out of medical school in my 3rd year after my mental health collapsed under the pressure, now worked as a hospital receptionist, and lived alone in 400 square feet of disappointment. The comparison had been drawn, and I'd been found wanting. Sure, David. I hope you all have a great time. My voice came out steadier than I expected. He grunted something that might have been goodbye and hung up. I set my phone down carefully on my kitchen counter, which was also my desk, which was also the only counter I had. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with familiar judgment. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Mom just told me about Christmas. Don't take it personally. They're just worried about you. The message sat there, glowing with false sympathy. Emily had always been good at pretending to care while subtly reinforcing every criticism our parents made. She perfected the art of the concerned sister routine, furrowing her brow and asking if I was doing okay financially in front of relatives, sighing about how difficult my life must be compared to hers. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked my bank account, something I'd been avoiding for weeks. The number that appeared made my stomach drop, but not for the reason my family would have assumed. The balance showed $8,400,000 and some change. 3 months earlier, my estranged uncle on my mother's side had passed away. Charles Miller had been the family outcast, the one my parents never spoke about except in hushed, disapproving tones. He'd moved to Colorado in his 20s to find himself, which in my family's vocabulary meant he failed to become a doctor or lawyer or anything else respectable. They'd written him off completely. What they hadn't known was that Charles had invested early in a tech startup that had exploded into a billion-dollar company. What they especially hadn't known was that Charles had been quietly following my life, had reached out to me during my darkest period after I left medical school, and had become the only family member who'd actually listen when I talked about feeling suffocated by expectations. His will had been specific. Everything went to me with one condition: I couldn't tell my family about the inheritance for at least 6 months. Charles's lawyer, a sharp woman named Eleanor Vance, had delivered the news with a knowing smile. Your uncle wanted you to have time to figure out what you wanted without their interference, she'd explained. He was quite clear about that. I'd been sitting on this information through Thanksgiving, through countless phone calls where Carol sighed about my situation, through David's increasingly pointed comments about responsibility and success. The money had been real for months. But I'd left it untouched, almost afraid to believe it existed. Now, staring at my phone after David's call, something shifted. The fear dissolved, replaced by a crystalline clarity about exactly what I wanted to do next. I called Eleanor the next morning. I want to buy a property in Colorado, I told her, something spectacular, and I need it done in 2 weeks. She didn't even pause. I know exactly the place. It just came on the market yesterday. A mountain lodge outside Aspen, 8 bedrooms, views that'll make you cry. The owner needs to sell quickly for a divorce settlement. I can have you in there by December 20th if you're serious. I'm serious. The purchase moved at a speed that only money makes possible. Eleanor handled everything while I took a week off work, claiming a family emergency that wasn't technically a lie. I flew to Colorado, walked through a property that looked like it had been designed by someone who had wanted to build a castle made of glass and timber, and signed papers in a lawyer's office with mountain peaks visible through the windows. The lodge sat on 15 acres of private land, accessible by a winding road that cut through pine forests. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the kind of views that appeared on inspirational posters. The main living area featured a stone fireplace large enough to stand in, with furniture that managed to be both rustic and clearly expensive. The kitchen had professional-grade everything, gleaming and unused. 8 bedrooms meant 8 individual suites, each with its own bathroom and mountain views. I furnished it in 72 hours, hiring a decorator who specialized in luxury mountain properties and telling her to make it look like a spread from Architectural Digest. She delivered. Every room became a masterpiece of careful casualness, the kind of space that whispered wealth without shouting it. On December 15th, I drove my 15-year-old Honda to my parents' house in Richmond, Virginia, for what I told them would be a quick visit. Emily was already there with Michael and the kids, their Tesla parked prominently in the driveway. I rang the doorbell like a guest instead of using my key. Carol answered, surprise flickering across her face. "Sweetheart, we weren't expecting you. Is everything all right?" "Everything's perfect," I said, stepping into the foyer where family photos lined the walls. Most featured Emily's family. A few older ones included me, back when I'd still been following the script. I actually wanted to talk to everyone about Christmas. David appeared from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose, expression already skeptical. Emily emerged from the kitchen with a coffee mug, eyebrows raised in question. Michael trailed behind her, checking his phone. "I know you've made other plans," I continued, keeping my voice light and pleasant, "but I wanted to extend an invitation of my own. I've rented a place in Colorado for the holidays, and I'd love for everyone to join me there instead. All expenses paid, of course." The silence that followed was exquisite. David's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been concern about my mental state. Carol's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Emily actually laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "You rented a place," Emily repeated slowly, as if speaking to someone who'd lost touch with reality, "in Colorado for Christmas?" "I did. It's quite beautiful. 8 bedrooms, plenty of space for everyone. There's a chef's kitchen, a home theater, even a game room the kids would love. Maya and Leo would have an amazing time." Michael had stopped looking at his phone. "That sounds expensive. How exactly are you planning to pay for this?" I smiled at him with genuine warmth. "Don't worry about the finances, Michael. I've got it covered. I just want to spend Christmas with my family somewhere special." David had found his voice, and it carried all the patronizing concern I'd grown up hearing. "Sweetheart, this is exactly the kind of impulsive decision-making we've been worried about. You can't afford to rent some luxury property in Aspen. You work at a hospital reception desk. I know what I can afford, David." My voice was firm. "The invitation stands. Christmas Eve through New Year's Day. I'll send you the address and details." "We already have plans," Carol interjected quickly, glancing at Emily. "We're doing Christmas here, remember? Emily's already arranged everything." Emily set her coffee mug down with a decisive click. "Look, I appreciate the thought, but this is a little concerning. Have you talked to anyone about this? A therapist, maybe? Because this kind of grandiose planning could be a sign that you're not doing well mentally." The irony of being gaslit about my own financial situation by people who'd spent years criticizing that same situation wasn't lost on me. I'd expected this exact response, had actually looked forward to it. I'm doing better than I've ever been, I told her honestly. The offer is genuine, and it's open until December 20th. If you change your minds, let me know. I left before they could mount a coordinated intervention effort. Through the front window, I could see them huddling together, probably discussing what to do about my apparent break with reality. That evening, I sent a detailed email with photos of the lodge, the address, and a full itinerary of what I planned: private chef Gabriel for all meals, ski passes to Aspen's best slopes, a spa day for the adults, activities for the kids. I kept the tone casual and inviting, making it clear this wasn't a joke or a manic episode, but a genuine offer. Emily responded within an hour. I think you need help. This isn't normal behavior. Please consider talking to a professional before you do something you'll regret. David called me directly. I don't know what's going on with you, but this needs to stop. You're worrying your mother. We're not going to enable whatever this is by pretending it's okay. I let their messages pile up unanswered. Instead, I focused on the final preparations for the lodge. Chef Gabriel was flying in on the 23rd. The ski equipment rental company was delivering gear on the 22nd. I'd arranged for the lodge to be stocked with enough food to feed a small army, including all the traditional Christmas dishes Carol usually made, plus upgrades she'd never considered. December 20th arrived. The deadline I'd set had passed without any response from my family beyond concern and criticism. I posted a single photo on social media, the first I'd shared in months. It showed the lodge's great room with a fire roaring, mountains visible through the windows, and the enormous Christmas tree I'd had delivered and professionally decorated. The caption read, "Christmas at the Lodge. Grateful for new beginnings." Within minutes, my phone started buzzing. Old friends I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to catch up. Distant relatives began commenting. Emily's friends, people who'd never acknowledged my existence, started sending messages asking about my amazing vacation rental. Then Emily called. I let it go to voicemail, curious what approach she'd take. Her message started with forced casualness. Hey, so I saw your post. That place looks incredible. Where did you say it was again? We were actually thinking that maybe a change of scenery for Christmas could be nice. The kids have been begging to see snow. Call me back. I deleted the message without responding. Instead, I posted another photo, this time of Chef Gabriel preparing dinner in the professional kitchen. Caption, "First night at the lodge. Chef Gabriel is amazing." Carol called next. "Honey, we've been talking, and maybe we were too hasty about Christmas. If the offer is still open, we'd love to come out and see this place. It looks lovely." The offer expired on the 20th, Carol. You made your choice. Don't be ridiculous. We're family. Of course, you'll make an exception for family. The word family hung in the air between us, loaded with irony. I'm spending Christmas with people who actually wanted to spend it with me, I said calmly. Have a great holiday at Emily's. I hung up before she could respond. The phone immediately rang again. I turned it off. What my family didn't know was that I'd invited other people to the lodge. Olivia Green, my favorite nurse from the hospital who'd covered for me countless times when I needed mental health days. Her husband and their 3 kids were arriving on the 23rd. My old roommate from college, Chloe Chin, who'd stayed in touch even when I dropped out and disappeared into my depression. She was bringing her girlfriend. Eleanor Vance, the lawyer who'd handled Charles's estate with such care and discretion. 2 other friends from a support group I'd attended after leaving medical school, Rebecca and Jessica, both of whom had become genuine friends during the hardest period of my life. These were people who'd seen me at my worst and never made me feel worthless because of it. People who'd celebrated my small victories, like getting the receptionist job or finally sleeping through the night without nightmares about failing out of school. People who'd never once called me a deadbeat or suggested I was a disappointment. On December 23rd, I picked Olivia up from the airport in Aspen. She'd been skeptical about the whole thing until she saw the lodge in person. Her kids, ages 7, 9, and 11, screamed with excitement when they saw the game room and the mountain views. "Girl," Olivia said, pulling me aside while her husband wrangled the children, "you have got to explain what's happening here. Last time we talked, you were eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week." I told her everything about Charles, about the inheritance, about my family's Christmas decision and David's deadbeat comment, about sitting on $8 million while they called me a failure, about the 6-month waiting period that had finally expired. Olivia listened with her mouth hanging open. When I finished, she hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. "Your uncle sounds like he was a genius," she whispered. "And your family sounds like they deserve exactly what they're getting." Chloe arrived that evening with her girlfriend, both of them giddy about the luxury accommodations. Eleanor came bearing expensive wine and a knowing smile. Rebecca and Jessica showed up together, having carpooled from Denver. We spent Christmas Eve cooking together in that enormous kitchen, laughing and drinking wine while snow fell outside the windows. The kids built snowmen on the property. Olivia's husband turned out to be excellent at building fires. We watched movies in the home theater, made hot chocolate with real chocolate that Chef Gabriel had prepared, and stayed up too late talking about everything and nothing. My phone, which I turned back on, continued to blow up with messages from my family. They progressed from casual interest to desperation. Emily had apparently driven past my apartment building and confirmed I wasn't there. She'd called my work and discovered I'd taken vacation time. Carol had left 6 voicemails, each one more frantic than the last. The messages revealed so much about how they actually thought. David suggested I was having some kind of episode and needed to come home immediately. Emily wrote a long text about how I was making a mistake and alienating the people who care about me most. Carol tried guilt, reminding me of every Christmas memory we'd ever had, as if those memories hadn't been tainted by years of comparison and judgment. On Christmas morning, we opened presents around the tree. I'd gotten thoughtful gifts for everyone. Nothing ostentatious, just things that showed I'd been paying attention to who they were and what they loved. Olivia cried over a first-edition copy of a book she'd mentioned loving in college. Chloe's girlfriend, who was a painter, gasped over a set of professional-grade brushes she'd been saving up for. They'd all gotten me gifts, too. Modest but meaningful things, a journal from Eleanor with a note about writing my own story, a framed photo from Olivia of the 2 of us at the hospital, both making ridiculous faces during a particularly long shift, a painting from Chloe's girlfriend of a mountain scene that looked suspiciously like the view from the lodge. I posted a photo of all of us around the tree. Everyone laughing, the kids playing with their new toys, the adults holding coffee mugs and wearing matching ridiculous Christmas sweaters Olivia had brought for everyone. Caption: "Found family is the best family. Merry Christmas from the lodge." The response was immediate and explosive. Emily called 17 times in a row. When I finally answered, she was crying. "How could you do this to us?" she sobbed. "It's Christmas and you're posting pictures of strangers while we're sitting here without you." Carol is devastated. "You told me I wasn't invited to your Christmas," I reminded her gently. "I made other plans. We changed our minds. We wanted to come. You're being incredibly petty and childish about this. I'm spending Christmas with people who wanted me there from the beginning. People who never called me a deadbeat or suggested I was a failure. I hope you and Michael and the kids are having a nice time at Carol and David's." "Where did you get the money for this?" The question came out sharp, accusatory. "Did you take out loans? Are you going to end up in debt and expect us to bail you out?" I smiled at the phone even though she couldn't see it. "I'm not in debt, Emily. Uncle Charles left me his entire estate. $8.4 million. I've been sitting on it for months while David called me a deadbeat and you all decided I wasn't worth including in Christmas." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I could hear voices in the background. Probably my parents asking what was wrong. Uncle Charles barely knew you, Emily finally said, her voice strange and tight. Why would he leave you anything? Because he reached out when I was falling apart and he actually listened. Because he understood what it felt like to be the family disappointment. Because he saw something in me that none of you ever bothered to look for. You've been rich for months and you didn't tell us. Charles's will stipulated I couldn't tell you for 6 months. That waiting period ended 2 weeks ago, right around the time David told me there were no deadbeats allowed at Christmas this year. Funny how that timing worked out. I could hear her breathing fast and shallow. This is insane. You bought an $8 million house. The house cost $3 million. It's an investment property. I'm actually pretty good with money, it turns out. Probably because I've spent years living on nothing and learning to make every dollar count. Carol wants to talk to you. I'm sure she does. Tell her Merry Christmas for me. I have to go. We're about to have breakfast. I hung up and turned off my phone again. Olivia raised her eyebrows at me from across the room. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, I told her honestly. We spent the day skiing, the kids taking lessons while the adults navigated the easier slopes. Chef Gabriel had prepared a Christmas dinner that made my mother's traditional meal look like cafeteria food. We ate until we were uncomfortable, drank wine by the fire, and played board games that got increasingly competitive as the evening went on. I didn't think about my family sitting in my parents' house, probably discussing my betrayal and my windfall in equal measures. I didn't wonder if they were enjoying Emily's carefully planned Christmas or if it felt hollow without me there to serve as their cautionary tale. I was too busy laughing at Rebecca's terrible charades performance and helping Olivia's youngest with a puzzle. The messages continued throughout the week. David, who'd called me a deadbeat, suddenly wanted to talk about financial planning and make sure I wasn't being taken advantage of by predatory advisors. Emily sent long texts about family loyalty and forgiveness, conveniently forgetting every snide comment she'd made about my life over the past few years. Carol tried a different approach, talking about how proud she was of me and how she'd always known I'd do well eventually, rewriting history with breathtaking audacity. I responded to none of them. Instead, I focused on the people who were actually there, who dropped their own plans or rearranged their holidays to spend time with someone they cared about, not someone whose net worth made them suddenly worth knowing. On New Year's Eve, we had a party. Eleanor made a toast about new beginnings and second chances. Olivia's husband, slightly drunk, made a rambling speech about found family that made everyone cry. Chloe and her girlfriend announced their engagement, and we all screamed and celebrated like it was the best news we'd ever heard. At midnight, as fireworks from a neighboring property lit up the sky outside the windows, I raised my glass with people who had never once made me feel less than enough. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd needed $8 million to finally escape my family's judgment. But I'd needed these friends to remember I'd always had value regardless of my bank account. I posted one final photo before the end of the night. The whole group of us, glasses raised, mountains dark behind us, faces flushed with happiness and alcohol and genuine affection. Caption: ending the year with gratitude for the people who loved me when I had nothing and who love me the same now that I have everything. Here's to 2024. Emily commented within minutes. We loved you, too. We're still your family. Please call me. I deleted the comment and turned off commenting on the post. Eleanor found me on the deck later, standing in the cold and staring at the stars. Having regrets? She asked, handing me a blanket. Not even slightly. I keep waiting to feel guilty, but I just feel free. Charles would be proud of you. He always said the best revenge was living well, and you're certainly doing that. I'm not trying to get revenge, I said. Though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't entirely true. I just wanted one Christmas where I wasn't a family failure. You got that and more. Eleanor clinked her glass against mine. For what it's worth, I've been handling estates for 20 years, and I've never seen someone use an inheritance more purposefully. You could have thrown money around to prove a point, but instead, you created something meaningful. The week after New Year's, I returned to work at the hospital. My coworkers noticed something different about me, a lightness that hadn't been there before. I hadn't quit my job or made any grand gestures with the money beyond buying the lodge. I still showed up for my shifts, still did the same work, but I did it without the weight of feeling like I'd failed at life. Olivia had returned to her nursing shifts, too, and during our lunch break 2 days after we got back, she leaned across the table with a serious expression. Have you thought about what you're going to do long-term? With the money, I mean. I've been thinking about going back to school, I admitted. Not medicine. Maybe psychology or social work. Something where I can help people who feel like I felt. That would be amazing. You'd be incredible at that. And I want to keep the lodge and use it for retreats. Maybe for people recovering from burnout or dealing with family estrangement. Somewhere people can go to remember they're not failures just because they didn't follow someone else's script. Olivia's eyes got wet. Charles really did know exactly who to leave his money to. My family's messages had slowed but not stopped. They'd moved into a new phase, rationalization and gentle manipulation. David sent an email about how families have disagreements but blood is thicker than water, apparently forgetting that the full saying is actually the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Carol tried to arrange a lunch date, just the two of us, promising not to discuss anything uncomfortable. Emily sent photos of Maya and Leo with captions about how much the kids miss their aunt. I responded to Emily because the kids were innocent in all of this. I'd love to see Maya and Leo. We could meet at the park next Saturday, just me and them. You're welcome to drop them off and pick them up. She didn't write back. 3 weeks after Christmas, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Is this the owner of the mountain lodge in Colorado? A professional female voice asked. Yes, this is she. My name is Isabella Rodriguez, and I'm a writer for Mountain Living magazine. We received a tip about a property that recently sold and has been generating quite a bit of social media attention. Would you be interested in being featured in an article about luxury mountain retreats? I almost laughed. Of course, someone had tipped them off. What kind of article? We're doing a piece on unexpected property owners, people who've acquired these estates through unusual circumstances. Our source mentioned that you have an interesting story about family and new beginnings. Obviously, we'd only include what you're comfortable sharing. Can I think about it and get back to you? Absolutely. I'll email you my contact information. That evening, I called Eleanor. Did you tip off a magazine about the lodge? She had the grace to sound only slightly sheepish. I may have mentioned it to a friend who works in publishing. You're not upset, are you? I thought it might be good for the retreat idea you mentioned, publicity without having to pay for it. You're devious. I'm effective. There's a difference. Are you going to do the interview? I don't know. Part of me wants to keep this private, and another part of me wants my family to open a magazine and see exactly what they dismissed. I laughed because she was right. How did Charles stand being estranged from them for so many years? He told me once that the price of freedom was sometimes loneliness, but loneliness was better than feeling worthless. He said he'd rather be alone than constantly made to feel like he wasn't enough. Those words hit hard because I'd felt exactly that way for years. The loneliness of my studio apartment had been painful, but it had been nothing compared to the pain of sitting at family dinners and feeling invisible despite being right there. I did the interview. Isabella Rodriguez came to the lodge in February, photographed every spectacular angle, and listened to my story with what seemed like genuine interest. I told her about Charles, about medical school, about the years of being the family disappointment. I told her about the Christmas invitation and David's deadbeat comment. I told her about the friends who'd come to the lodge and the revelation that chosen family could be stronger than blood. The article ran in April. 6 glossy pages with photos that made the lodge look like something from a dream. They titled it, From Deadbeat to Mountain Retreat, One Woman's Journey to Redefining Success. The article was fair and balanced, including quotes from me about understanding my family's perspective while also being honest about the pain of their rejection. My mother Carol called within hours of the magazine hitting stands. I'd known she would, had actually prepared for it. How could you air our private family business in a national magazine? Her voice shook with anger and something that might have been hurt. Do you know how humiliating this is? People are calling me asking if it's true that we disinvited you from Christmas. It is true, Carol. David literally told me no deadbeats were allowed. That's taken out of context. He was worried about you. We all were. We thought you were struggling, and we didn't want you to feel bad about not being able to afford gifts or contribute to the dinner. The revisionist history was almost impressive in its audacity. You're right that I was struggling, but not financially. Not anymore. I was struggling with the fact that my family only valued me based on markers of success they defined. I was struggling with feeling worthless every time I saw you because nothing I did was ever good enough. That's not fair. We've always loved you. Maybe, but you didn't like me very much. There's a difference. She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to take back the words and smooth everything over the way I'd always done. But a bigger part of me recognized that her tears were about her own discomfort, not about my pain. Your father David wants to talk to you about investing some of your money. He has ideas about how to make it grow. And there it was. The real reason for the call. Tell David I have an excellent financial advisor, and I'm not interested in his input. You're punishing us for caring about you. I'm protecting myself. From people who only started caring once I had something they wanted. There's a difference. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt oddly calm. Olivia had been right when she said that setting boundaries would feel terrible at first, but liberating eventually. The magazine article brought unexpected attention. Other people reached out with similar stories about family estrangement and conditional love. Some shared their own experiences of being the black sheep who'd eventually succeeded. Others were still in the thick of it, still living in studio apartments and working reception desks while their families whispered about disappointment. I started a blog. Nothing fancy, just a simple website where I wrote about recovery from family trauma, about rebuilding self-worth, about learning that success wasn't one size fits all. The response was overwhelming. People who'd never commented on anything online shared their own stories in my comments section. By summer, I'd enrolled in a graduate program for clinical mental health counseling. The irony of going back to school after dropping out of medicine wasn't lost on me, but this time felt different. I wasn't doing it to meet anyone's expectations, but my own. Emily reached out in June through email, apparently having given up on phone calls I wouldn't answer. Her message was long and meandering, full of justifications and half-apologies. She claimed she'd always supported me, that I was remembering things wrong, that she'd just been trying to help when she'd suggested therapy or questioned my decisions. The email concluded with a paragraph about Maya and Leo asking about me, wondering why their aunt never came around anymore. It was emotional manipulation at its finest, using the kids as leverage. I responded with one line, I'm happy to have a relationship with Maya and Leo. Are you willing to let that happen without controlling the narrative? She didn't write back. In September, the first official retreat happened at the lodge. 8 women, all dealing with various forms of family estrangement or recovery from toxic relationships. I partnered with my therapist friend Rebecca from my support group to run the program. We spent a week talking, healing, skiing, cooking together, and building connections. One participant, a woman named Laura, who'd been disowned by her religious parents for being gay, stood up on the last night and gave a tearful speech about how she'd forgotten what it felt like to be accepted. Another woman, Sophia, had been written off by her family for choosing art school over law school. She brought a canvas and painted a mountain landscape during the week, gifting it to me as thanks. This, I realized, was what Charles had wanted me to find. Not just financial freedom, but purpose. Not just escape from my family's judgment, but a way to help others escape similar situations. The local newspaper ran a piece about the retreats. Then a Denver news station did a segment. By October, I had a waiting list of people wanting to attend future sessions. The lodge that I bought, partly out of spite, had become something meaningful, a genuine refuge for people who needed to remember their worth. My family saw the news coverage. Of course, they did. David sent a formal letter, typed and printed, about how he'd reconsidered his previous position and would like to discuss our relationship moving forward. The letter was stiff and awkward, as close to an apology as he was apparently capable of giving. Carol tried a different approach, showing up at the hospital one afternoon and asking to speak with me during my lunch break. I met her in the cafeteria, curious despite myself. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile. The past year had been hard on her. I could see it in the lines around her eyes. "I miss you," she said simply. "I know I handled things badly, but I miss my daughter." "Which daughter do you miss?" I asked gently. "The one who was trying to be a doctor. The one who was failing at life, or the one who inherited money and became interesting again?" "That's not fair, is it?" she whispered. "When was the last time you called me before you found out about the inheritance? When was the last time you invited me over just to spend time together, not to fix me or improve me?" She didn't have an answer for that. We sat in silence for a while, the cafeteria noise filling the space between us. "I want to try," she finally said. "To do better, to know you as you actually are, not as I think you should be." I don't know if I believe that. I understand, but I'd like the chance to prove it. I thought about Charles, about how he'd chosen complete estrangement over conditional relationships. I thought about the women at the retreat who'd found peace in cutting ties with families who'd hurt them. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. "We can try," I said carefully. "But it needs to be different. No more comments about my life choices. No more comparisons to Emily. No more trying to fix what you see as broken. Okay. And you need to understand that I'm not the same person I was. I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. I'm happy with who I am and what I'm doing." "I can see that," she said quietly. "The article, the retreats, the way you talk about it all. You seem more yourself than I've ever seen you." It wasn't a full reconciliation. We didn't hug or cry or have a hallmark moment, but it was a start, or at least the possibility of one. We agreed to meet for coffee the following week, just the two of us, with no agenda beyond talking. David and Emily were harder. David sent occasional emails, usually about investments or financial planning. Still unable to connect with me on any level that wasn't transactional. Emily's messages came in waves, sometimes apologetic, sometimes defensive, always focused on her own discomfort rather than my experience. I responded to neither of them beyond polite acknowledgments. Some bridges, I'd learned, weren't worth rebuilding. Some relationships did more damage than their absence ever could. By December, a full year after that devastating phone call from David, I was planning the second Christmas at the lodge. Olivia and her family were coming back, along with Chloe and her now wife. Eleanor was bringing her partner. The retreat participants from September were organizing a reunion. My mom Carol had asked tentatively if she could come alone, and I'd surprised myself by saying yes. The lodge had become exactly what I'd needed it to be, a place where people could come and be accepted as they were, where success was measured in healing and growth rather than salary and status. The deadbeat daughter had built something remarkable, not to prove anyone wrong, but because she'd finally been free to prove herself right. I posted a photo on Christmas Eve. The same great room, another enormous tree, the same mountain views. This time the room was full of people, some familiar from last year, some new faces, all of them laughing and holding drinks and looking genuinely happy. My mom was in the photo, too. Off to one side, smiling uncertainly, but present. Caption: Year 2 at the lodge. Grateful for growth, healing, and learning that family is something you build, not just something you're born into. 2. Everyone finding their own path this year, you're not lost. You're just walking a different trail. Emily commented almost immediately. Beautiful. Merry Christmas. I left the comment there. A small acknowledgement of something that might eventually heal, or might stay broken. Either way was okay. David didn't comment. I hadn't expected him to. That night, as snow fell outside and the fire crackled and people told stories about their years and their journeys, I raised my glass in a toast. To Uncle Charles, I said, who knew that the best revenge wasn't proving them wrong, but proving to yourself that you were right all along. Everyone drank to that. Even my mom, who was crying quietly in her corner chair, raised her glass and nodded. The Deadbeat had hosted Christmas at her $8 million mountain lodge for the second year running. And this time the only people in attendance were the ones who'd actually deserved the invitation. What would you have done if you were in my shoes?